You don't need no special education, just get on board. You don't need no fancy certification, just get on board. You don't gotta have a perfect pedigree or be a member of high society. All you've gotta do is get on board. Get on board this train to freedom. Get on board. Get on board this train to freedom. Get on board. Now you can walk onto this train to freedom. Get on board. And you can roll onto this train to freedom. Get on board. And you can crawl onto this train to freedom. All you gotta do is grab hold and get aboard. Hello, I'm Cheryl, and I'm here today because I want to tell you a story that I think's incredible. It's about a revolutionary idea, self-advocacy, an idea that's grown into a worldwide movement of and by people with developmental disabilities and their allies. A movement that's changing the lives of thousands and thousands of people for the better. Self-advocacy. It's a simple idea. It means advocating for yourself. It means insisting that you have rights and being willing to fight for them. All of us want to be able to make our own decisions based on what we think and feel is best for us. But for those of us with disabilities, far too often decisions affecting our lives are made by others, by parents or by professionals, people who think they know what's best for us, people who speak for us and about us, but without us. Self-advocacy says, that is not the way it should be, because we are our own best advocates. We are the true experts about what we want and need in life. Why, that's just common sense.
The self-advocacy movement consists of people who have a disability, learning how to speak out for themselves.
Self-advocacy, the way I see it, is a quality of life issue. It is to tell these people that they have choices, the community belongs to them to the best of their ability.
For many people, self-advocacy is a term of powerful personal identity. If someone says to you, I'm a self-advocate, they're saying, I have dignity and self-respect. I am your equal, and I expect that you will treat me as your equal.
Tell me, are we people first? Yeah! What? For too many years, society has kept handicapped people in the closet. The attitude has been out of sight, out of mind. I say no more. No more can we allow that kind of narrow-minded thinking to go on.
Although I embrace all of the goals and principles of self-advocacy, that's not my own personal identity. I have never been labeled mentally retarded or learning disabled, as many self-advocates have, but because of my extravagant differences, I have faced prejudice. I know what it's like to be treated as if you're less, as if you shouldn't be able to even control your own life. My personal identity is disability rights activist, and I'm an ally to self-advocates everywhere, because I know that if your rights are not protected, then my rights are not protected. And if my rights aren't protected, then yours aren't going to be either. We're fighting for the same things: freedom, equality, and justice for all of our people. And I think the best way that we're going to accomplish what we want to is if we all get on board together. We're making great progress. Today, thousands of people identify as self-advocates, but that hasn't always been the case. In the not-too-distant past, parents and professionals made all the decisions: what to wear, what to eat, what to do, who to do it with, even where to live and die.
In the past, my number was 3328 before they opened my records and used my name. And that they're not just me, they do it to a lot of people in the institutions.
Before self-advocacy, most people with disabilities were imprisoned in institutions or kept quietly at home. No choices, no community. In order to survive, most people just took what they were given and did the best they could.
Your son's a special problem. But decent care for your boy doesn't have to cost a fortune. Now, let me tell you about a fine state institution that's doing a good job.
I was 8 years old when I went to the institution, and I was in a crib. When you see the experts, when you see the doctors, the directors, social workers, they say, well, can I have 3328 come in? And you walk in and you see all these experts, big giants. They look like giants to me when I was 7 years old. Some of the faces look like they can take my head off, and I was very, very skilled.
Throughout time, there have been ideas about disability that have influenced how people with disabilities are treated. These ideas are called models. Now, two of the models that have had the most influence and are still making it really hard for us to be treated as equals are the moral model and the medical model. Both of these models say that disability is bad. Disability is something gone wrong. The moral model says that if you have a disability, you must have committed some terrible sin and you're being punished by God. Of course, if you're such a corrupt being, then you must be locked away, hidden, punished, maybe even killed. Of course, the flip side is that you're not being punished, you're chosen. You're divine, special. Either way, you're not just a regular person and you don't get to live in the community. Now, the medical model says that if you have a disability, you've got something wrong with your body. You're either sick and you need to be cured, or you're broken and you need to be fixed. Either way, you're not just a regular person, you're this thing called disability. And it's as if everything about you is made invisible. Nothing else matters at all except the disability.
We are carrying on research from which we hope to discover the causes and thereby the cure and prevention of mental retardation. Cure and prevention, cure and prevention, cure, 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 cure.
Now, obviously, I am not a fan of either of these models because they both mean that I am not going to be accepted for all of who I am, just as I am. Both models say that if I want to be accepted in the world, if I want to be able to be part of the world, well, then I have to do everything I can to try to make it seem as if I don't have a disability. I'm supposed to hide my disability or disguise it, and in every way that I possibly can, try to overcome it. God, what a waste of time and energy. In the 1930s and 40s, we had a president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was disabled from polio and used a wheelchair. Every time this great man went out in public, he had to hide who he was just so he could do his job. He had people lifting him up and holding him up so it'd make it seem as if he was walking to the podium to speak. They painted his leg braces black so that they'd blend in with the black socks and the black pants. And all the press people got together and they agreed that they would never show the president as he really was. Only 2 photographs exist showing President Roosevelt sitting in his wheelchair. They were afraid that if people saw the president as disabled, that they'd lose confidence in him, that they wouldn't believe that he had the power or the strength or wasn't capable of doing the hard work of being president. Can you imagine what it was like for this great man to have to spend so much of his time and energy pretending to be able-bodied just so he could do his work? How humiliating. And how exhausting. Fortunately, the moral and medical models that say disability is bad aren't the only ideas we have about disability. We also have the minority group model that grew out of the civil rights struggles of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Now, instead of saying that there's something wrong with you or that you're bad, the minority group model says that there's something wrong with society. If all the people in a society aren't being treated equally, then the society is wrong, and it's the society that has to change. This was such a radical idea because for the first time, people weren't stuck seeing themselves as an individual victim with a problem. They were able to see themselves as part of a larger group, and then they could join together with others and fight for change, fight for a common cause. And they discovered that when they worked together, they had a lot more power than when they were working alone. What blows my mind is how often great social and political movements get started with a simple idea. Just like self-advocacy got started with the simple idea that we should speak for ourselves and make our own decisions.
We want to be heard.
In the 1950s, the civil rights movement got its kickstart when one ordinary black woman, Rosa Parks, decided not to move to the back of the bus. This simple act of self-respect and defiance sparked the imagination of oppressed peoples everywhere. People began taking to the streets in protest. Led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., African-American people and their allies joined together in a struggle for freedom, equality, and justice for all people, a struggle that continues to this day and has influenced many other groups of people to fight for their rights.
Martin Luther King is a real important person in my life because I feel that the civil rights movement is definitely what the self-advocacy movement is going to be the next civil rights movement, just because they had race for their issue and we have disability for our issue. I still think that, the issues are very much interconnected.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
At the same time that African Americans began to organize to fight for their rights, the parents of children with disabilities began to organize to fight for the rights of their children. They demanded better living conditions and decent education. They insisted that their children were not helpless, were not hopeless, that their children deserved a chance. It was the first time that people labeled mentally retarded were viewed as having potential. The first time that they were thought of as a people whose rights were being denied. The parents' movement was a grassroots movement like the African American struggle for civil rights. African Americans fought to end segregation based on race. Parents of children with disabilities fought to end segregation based on disability. Both organized to change legislation and to challenge old ideas. Throughout the 1960s, more and more groups of people began to get together to fight for their rights. African Americans continued their marches and their protests, saying, "I'm black and I'm proud, freedom, equality, and justice for all."
Martin Luther King said that each of us is great because each has something to contribute.
Women organized, coming forward to demand equal pay and an end to discrimination based on gender.
Hey, hey, what do you say? Ratify the ERA. Hey, hey, what do you say? Ratify.
We are the women that our parents warned us about, and we are proud.
They call themselves the Women's Liberation Movement, saying, "I'm a woman and I'm proud. Freedom, equality, and justice for all."
Historically, it took African Americans and women several hundred years to realize that they did not need to change as much as society needed to change and to improve its ways by pursuing greater justice. So we need to be impatient, but we also need to persist.
Gay people organized, coming forward to say, "We are not ashamed and we will not live closeted lives. I'm gay and I'm proud. Freedom, equality, and justice for all." There's one other important movement that helped to lay a foundation for us. Consumer advocacy, led by Ralph Nader.
And as soon as the walls of secrecy are broken down, both in government and in industry, the better off everybody will be.
Consumer advocacy is a simple idea that says that those of us who buy the goods and receive the services should have some say about the quality of those goods and whether the services are providing us with what they claim they are and what we need.
The civil rights movement, the women's movement, all the struggles we have had in our country have all taught us and expanded on this fundamental truth. Like all others, self-advocacy is challenging and then pushing back, completely redefining what it means to be both a person and a citizen.
In the late 1960s, early 70s, people with disabilities, inspired by the principles of the various civil rights movements and consumer advocacy, began to organize to fight for their rights. Ed Roberts became a leader in this fight. Ed Roberts, like President Franklin Roosevelt, was disabled from polio and used a wheelchair. He also used a respirator for breathing. When he wanted to go to college and live on campus like the other students, he was told he was too disabled. Just like President Roosevelt had been told that he was too disabled to be president. But unlike President Roosevelt, who lived at a time when only the moral and medical models of disability existed, Ed Roberts was able to see himself as a part of a minority group whose rights were being denied. And because he saw himself this way, he was able to fight for his right to be included just as he was, a person with a disability.
We're down to the bottom line, down to the basic issue here. Are we going to perpetuate segregation in our society? We're one of the largest minorities in this country. The issue of civil rights, of human rights, are not issues that people with disabilities can compromise any further. We now know that while we put the onus on the disabled's inability to learn, that in fact we failed as educators, as professional people, as a society, to find the right methods and the right training techniques to move people.
As people with disabilities began to organize to fight for their rights, the independent living movement was born.
We will no longer allow the government to oppress disabled individuals. We want the law enforced. We want no more segregation. We will accept no more discussion of segregation.
Independent living is a simple idea that says people with disabilities, we should be in control of our own lives. This idea is the core principle of the disability rights movement and of self-advocacy. One of the most active and forceful disability rights groups working today is ADAPT. Starting out with a handful of people with disabilities and their allies in the 1970s, fighting for accessible public transportation, ADAPT has grown into a powerful national movement with hundreds of members.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michigan has never seen anything quite like you before. Over 2 million Americans, young and old, are locked away in nursing homes and other institutions.
Than to die in a nursing home. Just like a nursing home, you can't get out. Just like a nursing home, you can't get out.
They lobby Congress, they hold demonstrations, they fight for the rights of all disabled people, saying, I'm disabled and I'm proud, freedom, equality, and justice for all. Thanks to the hard work and dedication of disability rights activists, we now have a civil rights law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA.
We will fight to the end of time any attempt to weaken ADA, IDEA, Medicaid, or the power of USA to protect its citizens. We will fight to the end of time for our right to get out of the nursing homes and the ghettos and to live free in our communities.
This act says that we, as people with disabilities, have all the same rights as non-disabled people. And now that we've got this law, it's our responsibility to use it.
I said, hey, 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 for the ADA.
At about the same time that the disability rights movement was getting started in the United States, self-advocacy got its kickstart in Sweden. A club got organized in which people with disabilities and non-disabled people got together to have a good time. What was so great about this club was that all the decisions were made by the people with the disabilities. The non-disabled folks were there to support only, even if it meant the people with disabilities made some mistakes.
We could do these things, we could take risks. Let us fail. Because sometimes professionals don't want us to be perfect and they don't want us to fail because we need to fail to learn our mistakes. We are only human, everyone make mistakes.
Now this may not seem like such a big deal today, but at the time it was revolutionary. Because at the time it was believed that people with disabilities should be protected at all costs. But the idea was so simple and such common sense. In order to be a human, you've got to be able to make mistakes. That's part of what it means to be a human being. And what was so great about this club and the idea of this club was that what they were really saying was, hey, just because you don't think exactly the way I think or do things exactly the way I would do them, that doesn't mean that you're wrong. That doesn't mean that you don't have any right to make decisions for yourself. By 1974, self-advocacy was becoming a movement. A group of self-advocates in Oregon gathered to organize the first United States conference. One man attending, responding to the label mentally retarded, said, "I want to be known as a person first." People First became the name of a new self-advocacy organization. Now, not all groups of self-advocates call themselves People First, but it is one of the most popular names, and it's now used by many self-advocacy groups throughout the world. For the first national conference, it was expected there'd be a small turnout, but over 600 self-advocates came from all over the United States. People who had never spoken publicly got a chance to be heard. For the first time, their voices counted.
People, they don't look at me sometimes as a person. They look at me past that. I don't like that.
We're just like everybody else. And that's important that we explain to them that we are smart. We are, in other ways, we are a genius. We may not be perfect and we may not be fast or slow, but we do know a lot of other things that maybe other people don't understand.
People with disabilities, speaking for themselves, making their own decisions. Ideas whose time had come. Thousands and thousands of people with disabilities all around the world becoming empowered, saying, I'm a self-advocate and I'm proud. Freedom, equality, and justice for all.
You can't live on 80 cents an hour.
Does the government think that these people are people at these salaries?
We are a civil rights group in a way. We are. And we shall overcome.
Underlying all the core beliefs of self-advocacy is the idea that every individual deserves self-respect, no matter what their disability is. Every human being is entitled to freedom, equality, and justice. So, if I'm a self-advocate, these are some of the things I believe. I am a person first. I am not a disability, and I am not an eternal child. I have a unique identity that is my own. I can make my own decisions. Parents and professionals should not decide where and how I live. I should. I should be listened to and allowed to make mistakes. We as self-advocates must help those who have higher support needs so that their decisions can be understood and respected. I believe in my value as a person. From birth, all people have equal worth. I am a valuable citizen, worker, and friend. I should be supported to like myself. I am equal to all other people. I do not believe in stereotypes that say that people with disabilities are less than fully human. I deserve to be treated as an equal in my community. I believe in self-empowerment. Support should empower me to make my own decisions regardless of the degree of my disability. I should be allowed to take risks. It should be up to me to ask for help from those whom I trust. I should have equal opportunities without regard to race, gender, culture, or sexual identity. I must be able to live and learn together with others. I must be able to participate fully in my community. Segregation is not acceptable. I must not be labeled. I have a right to be recognized as the person I am. Any true understanding of who I am will include a knowledge of disability, but I must never be identified as a disability label. Institutions are bad for people. Institutions destroy everything that makes life worth living. We must close down every institution and liberate every one of our sisters and brothers who are wasting away. We hold these truths to be self-evident, and it seems like common sense to me. You don't need no special education, just get on board. You don't need no fancy certification, just get on board. You don't gotta have a perfect pedigree or be a member of high society. All you've gotta do is get on board. Get on board this train to freedom. Get on board. Get on board this train to freedom. Get on board. Now you can walk onto this train to freedom. Get on board. And you can roll onto this train to freedom. Get on board. And you can crawl onto this train to freedom. All you gotta do is grab hold and get aboard. 'Cause together we are riding to freedom. We are riding this train to freedom. The self-advocacy train to freedom. Grab hold and get aboard. It doesn't matter if your skin is brown or white. If you roll through life or you walk upright, you can get on board this train to freedom. Get on board this train to freedom. Get on board. Get on board this train to freedom. Get on board. It doesn't matter if you are straight or gay, a woman or man with unequal pay. All you've gotta do is grab hold, get aboard. 'Cause we are riding together to freedom. We're gonna ride this train to freedom. The disability rights train to freedom. Grab hold, get on board. 'Cause together we are going to freedom. Together we are riding to freedom. We are riding this train to freedom. Grab hold now and get on board.